At Willowmere's bright river bend, the council gathered where pale stepping stones crossed a verdant bank, and the morning water curved through reeds like a friendly ribbon. Everything looks so verdant today that even my sketchbook wants more green pages.
Verdant means richly green with healthy growing plants, especially when a place looks fresh and full of life.
This whole valley feels bucolic to me, with orchards, footbridges, baskets, and birdsong instead of noise and hurry.
Bucolic describes the simple, peaceful beauty of the countryside and rural life.
Suri rested her teal satchel on a warm stone and traced the lazy meander of the river as it bent around the willow cluster, before slipping toward the marsh.
A meander is a winding curve in a river, path, or journey, rather than a straight rushed line.
And look how limpid the shallows are. Limpid water is clear enough for us to see pebbles, fish, and sunlight moving through it. Brindle tested the damp soil with one broad paw and grinned at Moss, who was already imagining summer fruit from the fertile terraces above the bend.
Fertile land produces strong growth with ease, which is why these orchard roots love the river's patient gift.
The marsh seems fecund too, because everywhere I look something tiny is hatching, blooming, or wriggling into the day.
Fecund means very productive in new growth or living things, full of the power to produce abundantly.
Beyond the council ring, luxuriant willow fronds spilled shade over dragonflies, while ducks glided past in a scene so soft that Pebble forgot to blink.
Luxuriant growth is thick, lush, and abundant, as if the plants had room to celebrate themselves.
From this hill, the orchards, grazing paths, and little cream cottages make a pastoral picture, almost like an old map deciding to breathe.
Pastoral describes the pleasing rural life of fields, flocks, and open country shaped by gentle human care.
For a while, the whole council simply listened to the placid current slide around the stones, while Tavi circled above with a cobalt flash and no urgent message at all.
Placid means calm and undisturbed, the kind of quiet that lets you hear tools, birds, and your own thoughts in the right order.
Then halcyon must be the perfect word for mornings like this, when the valley feels sunny, safe, and almost too happy to change.
Halcyon describes an especially peaceful and happy time, often remembered as calm, prosperous, and bright.
I hope we keep this halcyon river song forever, because I would hate to be the courier who arrives one day with news that the bend has fallen strangely silent.
The others smiled at Tavi's dramatic shiver, not yet knowing that the valley's most placid morning would soon become the measure of what they were trying to save. By late morning, Willowmere's cheerful bend looked altered. Wet stones that usually hid below the surface began to recede into daylight, and Pebble stopped drawing long enough to stare. The water has started to recede, which means it is pulling back and showing ground that should still be underwater.
Yes, and when a shoreline recedes, it moves away from its former edge instead of holding steady.
Suri knelt at the bend and watched the once busy current dwindle around the stepping stones until bright threads of water separated like loose ribbons.
Dwindle means to become steadily smaller or weaker, often little by little instead of all at once.
Along the marsh edge, soft mud had begun to desiccate, curling at the top where the sun licked it dry and where frog prints no longer filled with shining water. Desiccate means to dry out thoroughly, as if the moisture has been drawn away and the life of a place is being pinched.
The south bank looks almost arid already, and arid land feels thirsty, dry, and short on rain or soaking water.
Reeds that had brushed Pebble's knees at breakfast now stood in sparse clumps, leaving wide patches of naked bank between them. Sparse means thinly scattered, with too few things spread across a space that used to feel full. Even the fish seemed uneasy, gathering in a shallow pocket where the moving water showed a troubling paucity of depth compared with the broad silver lane from dawn.
Paucity means an insufficiency or a noticeably small amount, the kind that makes everyone realize something important is missing.
At the footbridge, the river no longer hummed. It could only trickle between exposed stones, making a sound like teacups being set down too carefully.
A trickle is a very small, slow flow, not the steady current a working valley depends on.
From above, I can see bright puddles shrinking apart, and some of them may simply evaporate if the noon heat keeps pressing down.
Evaporate means to turn from liquid into vapor and slip into the air, which steals water quietly even when no one opens a gate.
Moss dipped a carrot into a bucket for the lambs, then frowned because the animals themselves could dehydrate if the troughs kept warming and emptying.
Dehydrate means to lose too much water, whether it is a body, a leaf, or food left too long in hot wind.
If this keeps going for days instead of hours, we may be looking at drought, a serious shortage of rainfall and ready water across the valley.
Drought names a prolonged lack of water, and saying the word aloud helps us understand the scale without panicking.
The river still sparkles, but now it sparkles nervously, like it wants us to notice before the last bright channels disappear. No one laughed at Pebble's description this time, because the thinning bend had turned the council's halcyon morning into a problem they could no longer mistake for imagination. At the sunny council ring, every voice tried to name a catalyst for the vanishing river, and the bright noon air filled with theories before anyone agreed on a single cause.
The dry wind feels like the catalyst, the thing that pushed our calm worry into a real emergency.
A catalyst is a factor that speeds up change or sets an important process in motion.
But the heat alone may not be the full impetus, because the low water mark started slipping before today's glare became this fierce.
Impetus means the driving force or momentum that pushes an event forward.
Juniper unrolled her river charts and asked the ring to search for an antecedent, some earlier condition that arrived before the shrinking bend.
An antecedent is an earlier event or state that comes before the result we are noticing now.
Pebble worried that the argument itself could engender bad guesses if everyone kept speaking faster than they were thinking.
Engender means to cause or produce something, especially a feeling, condition, or result.
When Tavi reported that mill workers had heard a gate might be sticking upstream, the rumor seemed to precipitate a fresh wave of finger-pointing around the stones.
Precipitate as a verb means to bring something about suddenly or make it happen faster than expected.
Some neighbors say the trouble must stem from orchard irrigation, but I do not want blame to outrun evidence.
Stem from means originate in or grow out of a source. Suri set pebbles on the map where the Marsh channel, bridge pools, terraces, and storage pond formed a visible nexus of shared water.
A nexus is a connected center where several parts meet and influence one another.
So we can postulate a chain. Heat lowers flow, a sticky sluice slows return water, and extra drawing from storage leaves the bend too weak.
Postulate means propose an explanation as a starting idea before every detail is proven.
That careful model did not accuse anyone, but it did impel the council to stop trading suspicions and start following the river upstream together. Impel means drive someone toward action, like when a clear clue makes your feet move before your fear can complain.
And if any rumor tries to instigate a fight, I will carry the truth faster than the shouting.
Instigate means stir up or provoke an action, especially trouble, and that is exactly what we must not let rumor do.
With guesses sorted from causes, the council left the ring in a bright, determined line, ready to test the postulate against the living river itself. The council followed the bright river upstream until Suri stopped at a narrower branch and asked everyone to notice where the smaller channel joined the main bend.
That side branch is a tributary, a smaller stream that flows into a larger river instead of ending on its own.
Pebble crouched by the join and found pale grit gathered behind roots where the slower water had quietly dropped its load.
That pale grit is sediment, the sand, silt, or tiny particles that moving water carries and then leaves behind.
Juniper unrolled an old blue map and pointed far beyond Willowmere to a lesson sketch showing where wide rivers meet the sea. An estuary is the broad, tidal place where river water meets the sea, So this inland trouble is beginning long before any estuary. And this fan-shaped drawing at the river mouth is a delta, where water splits and spreads fresh sediment into several small channels.
Delta names that branching landform at a river's mouth, which helps us see that today's clue belongs upstream, not at the coast.
The path then climbed beside an old clay embankment that had been built to guide floodwater away from the orchard terraces.
An embankment is a raised bank of earth or stone built to hold back water or support its course.
At the top of the embankment, they found the wooden sluice half stuck, with reeds wedged in the side rails and the handle leaning crookedly in the sun.
A sluice is a gate or sliding channel that controls how water is released or redirected.
Just beyond it sat a round hillside cistern, bright with painted measurement marks and fuller than Juniper expected after such a thirsty morning. A cistern is a storage tank that keeps collected water for later use, instead of letting it flow away at once. Suri pressed her paw to the cool ground and reminded everyone that an aquifer below the valley usually feeds hidden moisture upward, even in dry weeks.
An aquifer is an underground layer of rock or soil that stores and carries water beneath the surface.
Farther up the stones, the council reached a ledge where the river should have fallen in a silver cascade, yet only a thin lace of water slipped over the rock. A cascade is a small waterfall that tumbles down in shining steps, instead of one giant drop. When Brindle freed the reeds from the jammed gate and nudged the handle, the release rushed through the channel in one sudden bright torrent.
A torrent is a strong, fast flow of water, much wilder than the timid trickle we saw below.
So now we have real evidence. A stuck sluice, water lingering in the cistern, and too little help from the aquifer at the same time.
No single clue solved the whole mystery, but the upstream walk turned worry into proof, and proof gave the council a fairer way to argue about what came next. When the council hurried back to Willowmere Marsh, the bright pools still glimmered, yet Pebble heard the silence first because the usual splashy chorus had thinned to a careful hush. This place is still aquatic, but aquatic means living in, on, or closely connected to water, and now the water feels too tired for all its usual neighbors.
Look at the pale bloom near the reeds. Plankton are tiny drifting organisms in water, and they feed many larger creatures even when we can hardly see them.
Juniper pointed to a snail leaf coated with specks and explained that one lurking parasite can weaken a host by living on or inside it and stealing what it needs.
A parasite survives by drawing from another living thing, which matters more when the whole marsh is already under stress.
Near the warm inlet, Brindle warned the council away from a bright green slick that might carry toxin, a poisonous substance that can sicken fish, frogs, or birds in a small water pocket.
Toxin names a harmful poison made by a living source, and shallow warm water can let trouble collect where flow has nearly stopped.
Suri then traced circles in the mud and said each creature needs its own niche, the special role and living place that helps the whole marsh stay balanced.
When heat and low flow squeeze the same pool, one aggressive growth can proliferate, which means it spreads or multiplies very quickly.
Indeed, stringy algae had begun to proliferate across the inlet, turning open water into green threads that trapped light and crowded the minnows toward the edges. And when the minnows crowd, every predator that hunts them has a harder time finding healthy prey in the right places.
A predator is an animal that hunts other animals for food, so marsh imbalance travels upward through the whole food web.
Pebble looked around at every familiar denizen of Willowmere, from darting insects to shy frogs, and realized the marsh was not empty so much as unsettled. A denizen is a regular inhabitant of a place, someone or something that truly belongs there. Beside the cattails, a young amphibian rested half in water and half on a warm stone, reminding Pebble that frogs and salamanders depend on both wet and dry worlds to grow.
An amphibian can live part of its life in water and part on land, which makes marsh change especially dangerous for creatures like Pebble's cousins.
Above them, Tavi spotted a marsh hawk circling lower than usual, because even a carnivorous hunter must search harder when the small life pattern below begins to break apart.
Carnivorous means meat-eating, and hungry wings above us prove that the trouble is spreading from water plants all the way to the sky. So the Vanishing River is not only about thirsty orchards or empty buckets. It is about every linked life that depends on cool, moving water arriving on time.
Exactly. Once we can name the marsh's niche, denizens, predators, and amphibians clearly, we can argue for repairs without treating nature like decoration.
Then we have to save the quiet before it becomes normal, because a bright marsh should sound alive, and not like everyone is waiting for permission to breathe.
The council left the reeds with a new kind of urgency, carrying not only evidence of shrinking water, but also the fragile map of lives that would vanish next if they delayed. Moss led the council from the marsh to the sunny farm terraces above Willowmere, where low troughs and thirsty rows made the whole valley's agrarian heartbeat impossible to ignore.
Agrarian means connected to farming, fields, and the working life built around land and water.
Juniper pointed across the slope and marked which strips were truly arable, because only some of the sunlit ground could be tilled well enough to feed the valley.
Arable land is land fit for growing crops, not just any pretty hill that happens to catch the light.
Near the upper path, one patch lay fallow on purpose, resting for the season so the soil could recover instead of being pushed without pause.
Fallow describes cultivated land left unseeded for a time so it can regain strength.
Below that resting patch, Moss's orchard climbed the terrace in green bands of pears and plums, each young tree drinking less happily than it had a week before.
An orchard is land planted with fruit trees, and every tree here depends on careful timing rather than endless water.
At the goat pens, the animals nosed through thin baskets looking for fresh forage, while Brindle checked how much cut green feed remained under the shade cloth.
Forage is the grass, leaves, and other plant food animals search for or are given to eat.
Moss spread a paw over the rows and explained how hard everyone had worked to cultivate beans, melons, and herbs without wasting a single splash from the channel.
Cultivate means prepare and care for land or plants so they can grow well.
Beside the path stood a bright little greenhouse where seedlings waited in warm trays, protected from wind, but not from the valley's shrinking supply.
A greenhouse is a glass-sided growing house that helps young plants survive while they are still tender.
Juniper noticed the neat dark heaps near the compost shed and reminded Pebble that manure, though not glamorous, returns nutrients to tired ground and helps soil hold moisture.
Manure is animal waste used as fertilizer, and good farmers use it to feed the earth before asking the earth to feed them back.
Even so, the barn stores looked tense. Fodder stacks were lower than Moss liked, and the sacks of cereal grain for hens and winter mash had already been counted twice.
Fodder is stored feed for livestock, while cereal names grain crops like oats or barley that keep both animals and people going.
Pebble stared at the half-empty trough and finally understood that sharing river water was not a simple choice between marsh beauty and farm comfort, because both sides were carrying lives.
That is why we need rules, not blame. The fields, the orchard, the goats, and the marsh all belong inside the same answer.
If we ignore farm pressure, we become unfair. If we ignore marsh pressure, we become foolish. A wise council must hold both truths at once.
By the time they left the terraces, the council no longer saw only thirsty land. They saw labor, food, and care tied to every bucket the river could no longer spare. Back at the sunny council ring, Iona said the valley had gathered enough proof to legislate emergency water habits before rumor and resentment turned neighbors into rivals.
To legislate means to make an official rule or law instead of leaving everyone to guess what fairness should look like.
Juniper unrolled bright parchments and promised that the new legislation would be simple enough for marsh families, orchard keepers, and mill hands to follow without a translator.
Legislation is the written body of rules a community creates, so tomorrow's choices are not left to today's panic.
She then painted colored bands on a wooden board to form a river code for gates, storage draws, trough filling, and evening checks along the bend.
A code is a clear, ordered system of rules or signals that helps everyone act the same way.
Then who gets the license to lift the sluice or open the cistern when the river is low, and who must wait for a witness first?
A license is official permission to do a specific action, not a vague feeling that you probably meant well.
Suri tapped her teal satchel and reminded the ring that rules only help if they are announced quickly enough to reach every bank, bridge, and terrace before sunset.
Promulgate means to publish or announce a rule officially so the whole community hears it clearly.
Tavi volunteered to carry ribbon tag copies, while Iona explained how the council would regulate hours, bucket counts, and gate turns with the same calm standard for all.
Regulate means control by rule so use stays fair, measured, and predictable instead of wild or secretive.
Juniper proposed one temporary ordinance for the dry spell: open sharing at dawn, witnessed gate work at noon, and no extra private storage after dusk.
An ordinance is a formal local rule made by a council or town for a practical public need.
Moss agreed that the orchard could help levy a work duty too, asking each household to contribute one repair shift, one reed clearing hour, or one bucket patrol each week.
To levy is to impose or collect something officially, such as a duty, fee, or required share of work.
Brindle added a bright bead line to the chart and said each field, trough, and cistern should follow a quota until the river gained strength again.
A quota is a fixed allowed amount, a limit that keeps one need from swallowing every other need.
And the extra hidden fills from private storage should stop for now. Right, even if someone insists it is only a little.
Yes, that pause is a moratorium, a temporary stop on an activity until conditions improve or better evidence appears.
Then the moratorium begins tonight, the code is public by dusk, and the legislation belongs to the whole valley instead of one loud corner of it.
Under honey light and kingfisher wings, the council chose rules before anger, and the river's first fair code began to travel downstream with the evening breeze. At Sunstone Bridge, orchard keepers, marsh families, and mill hands gathered in honey light. But the bargaining nearly froze before it began because each side feared losing the little water still moving below the arches.
If we cannot agree alone, I will arbitrate the first round, which means I will hear both sides and help settle the dispute fairly.
To arbitrate is to judge between opposing sides and guide them toward a binding decision.
Suri stepped between the bucket lines and tried to mediate, asking everyone to speak in turns so worry would not become a contest of louder voices.
Mediate means step in between people in conflict and help them move toward agreement.
Juniper spread her charts on the bridge rail and offered to broker a Dawn Marsh, Noon Orchard schedule that gave each group a clear turn instead of a vague promise.
To broker is to arrange or negotiate an agreement between parties who cannot settle it easily on their own.
For a moment, the talk struck an impasse when the mill keeper insisted the wheel could not pause, and Moss replied that fruit trees could not drink speeches.
An impasse is a deadlock, a point where progress stops because neither side will move.
The sharp friction of that moment made even Tavi fold his wings, because every small sigh and hoof tap sounded like another spark near dry reeds.
Friction can mean rubbing resistance, but in a dispute it also means tense disagreement that makes cooperation harder.
Yet not everyone was dug in. The Marsh reed weavers seemed amenable once Suri showed how measured releases at dawn would keep frog pools from collapsing.
Amenable means willing to listen, cooperate, or accept a reasonable plan.
One barrel-stacked miller still sounded intransigent, repeating that old habits mattered more than shared trouble even after the sluice evidence lay open on the rail.
Intransigent means refusing to compromise or soften your position, even when compromise is plainly needed.
So Juniper redrew the schedule with parity between marsh rescue work and orchard watering, giving each side equal hours, equal witnesses, and equal public records.
Parity means equality or balanced standing, the kind that helps rivals see fairness instead of favoritism.
That change let Moss, Brindle, and the Reed Weavers form a practical coalition willing to clear channels together, if the mill hands accepted the same watch duty.
A coalition is a temporary alliance of different groups joining for a shared goal.
Tavi carried the revised chart across the bridge, and even the stubborn miller finally nodded when he saw his workers would keep a turn instead of losing one.
Then let us ratify the bridge bargain at sunset, because to ratify is to approve an agreement officially, so it truly takes effect.
One by one, the Valley delegates placed painted pebbles on the rail, and the meeting that had nearly stalled became Willowmere's first real compromise. The next bright morning, Juniper spread fresh parchment across the council table and said Willowmere was ready to turn yesterday's compromise into a public promise everyone could see.
A charter is a formal written document that states shared rights, duties, or rules, and this river charter belongs to the whole valley.
Iona read the first line aloud from Sunstone Bridge, so even the reeds and orchards seemed to lean in and listen.
An edict is an official public order announced with authority so nobody has to guess what the rule really says.
Moss asked whether the no-secret storage rule would stay firm even after the dry wind softened, and the bridge meeting became a memory.
Yes, because a decree is a formal decision the council issues with clear force, especially when the valley needs one voice instead of 10 private versions.
Juniper then copied the bridge agreement onto a painted cedar board, so the river rule would stand in plain sight beside the footpath all season.
A statute is a written rule with recognized standing, something durable enough to guide behavior after today's speeches are over.
Pebble smiled when the first bucket line formed exactly by the markers, because even children could see that the waiting families were already trying to be fair.
Compliant means ready and willing to follow a rule or requirement instead of dodging it the moment no one is watching.
Still, Iona reminded the crowd that one neat line was only a beginning, because real fairness depends on habit and not just one photogenic morning.
Compliance is the actual practice of obeying the rule day after day, even when thirst, hurry, or pride makes obedience inconvenient.
Tavi swooped down with news that one impatient cart had tried to pull ahead of its turn, before Brindle waved it back behind the blue pebbles.
To transgress is to go beyond a proper limit or break a rule that the whole community has agreed to respect.
Pebble hurried to repaint the Marshside guideline, so wheels and barrels would not creep farther into the cattails as the queue grew longer.
Encroach means to intrude gradually on another place, share, or right, especially by taking a little more space each time.
Juniper locked the gate keys in a glass box and declared that no mill hand, grower, or council favorite could usurp control of the sluice for private advantage.
Usurp means seize power or a right that properly belongs to others, and the river is too important to let anyone grab it alone.
Beside the charter, Moss painted coral stop bars under the storage schedule to curb extra fills before sunset and protect the shallow pools downstream.
To curb something is to restrain it or keep it under control before a bad habit grows strong enough to damage everyone.
Then let every paw print, hoofmark, and feather sign below this charter show that Willowmere chooses public fairness over private advantage.
One by one, the valley signed the cedar board, and the Bright River Charter turned yesterday's bargain into a visible promise sturdy enough to guide the next dry day too. With the charter posted and the bridge bargain ratified, Willowmere finally turned from debating to doing, and Bright work crews spread along the bend to rehabilitate the wounded banks and channels.
Rehabilitate means restore something damaged to good working condition again, whether it is a river path, a marsh pool, or a tired public tool.
Suri guided a laughing bucket chain from the cistern toward the side pools, so the first careful releases could replenish the pockets that had gone warm and shallow.
Replenish means fill again after loss or use, bringing back what has been drawn down or emptied away.
As clean water slid under the reeds and across the softened mud, even the wilted marsh edge began to rejuvenate, lifting from dullness into color and motion.
Rejuvenate means make something fresh, lively, or vigorous again after it has become worn, weak, or drained.
At the Green Slick Inlet, Suri set charcoal bundles and reed screens in place to neutralize the worst bloom, while Juniper opened a narrow ribbon of fresh flow around it.
Neutralize means make a harmful effect weaker or harmless by counteracting it with the right response.
Moss shifted orchard watering to dawn and invited every household to foster recovery with one useful task, whether clearing reeds, carrying clay, or checking markers.
Foster means encourage growth or help something healthy develop with steady support.
Pebble squealed when minnows flickered back into the side channel, because that quick silver movement seemed to revive the whole council's tired hearts at once.
Revive means bring back strength, activity, or life after weakness, stillness, or discouragement.
Juniper planted bright measuring poles and shade frames beside the repaired edge so the renewed channel could sustain its progress through the next hot afternoons.
Sustain means support or keep something going over time, instead of letting it fade after one strong start.
At midday, the volunteers shared pears, seed cakes, and mint water on a striped cloth, because even cheerful repair crews need sustenance if they hope to keep working well.
Sustenance is the food, drink, or other support that keeps living beings active and able to continue.
Brindle then wedged woven willow hurdles and clay sacks along the soft edge to bolster the bank before the next stronger release pressed against it.
Bolster means support or strengthen something so it can stand firm under pressure.
All the while, Iona reminded the valley to conserve every bucket, gate turn, and extra splash, because recovery would fail if old habits returned faster than the water.
Conserve means use something carefully and protect it from needless waste or loss.
So this is what fairness looks like after the talking ends. We rehabilitate, replenish, and conserve together until the river can carry more of the burden itself.
By sunset, the bend was still healing rather than healed, yet the brighter current, steadier banks, and revived side pools proved that Willowmere had finally begun helping the river instead of merely arguing about it. Over the next bright mornings, the council returned to Willowmere with clipboards, measuring poles, and patient eyes, because hope worked better when someone took time to gauge what the river was actually doing.
To gauge something is to measure or judge it carefully. So today I am gauging water depth instead of guessing from sparkle alone.
Juniper reset the painted marks on the cedar pole and asked Brindle to hold it steady while she checked whether yesterday's readings matched the true stone line.
Calibrate means adjust a tool so it measures accurately, which matters if one crooked mark could turn good news into bad math.
At the bridge pool, Suri noticed one unusually low notch on an otherwise improving chart and circled it before anyone could celebrate too early.
An anomaly is something that departs from the normal pattern, a strange reading we should examine instead of pretending it fits.
By noon, the shallow edge would rise a little, then sink a little, and Pebble finally saw how the bright line on the stake could oscillate without meaning the repair plan had failed.
Oscillate means move back and forth between positions or levels, the way river readings can sway around a trend before settling down.
Juniper stretched a fresh sheet across the rule board and drew the week's trajectory as a gentle upward path. Not perfect, but plainly healthier than the first dry morning.
Trajectory is the course, something follows over time, and our trajectory matters more than one nervous glance at noon.
On the marsh side, Moss and Pebble performed a census of frogs, minnows, dragonflies, and nesting reeds, counting who had returned and who still seemed absent from the soft green edges.
A census is a careful count of members in a group, which helps us compare feeling with evidence instead of relying on one dramatic story.
Suri reminded everyone that some pond changes were cyclical, because cool nights, hot afternoons, and timed releases could make the same pool look different at different hours.
Cyclical means happening in repeating cycles, so not every rise and fall signals a brand new crisis.
Even so, one side channel near the reeds remained erratic, turning glassy 1 hour and muddy the next whenever wind, shade, and leftover silt pushed against each other.
Erratic describes behavior that is irregular, unpredictable, or uneven, which is why that side pool still deserves extra watch markers.
Then Pebble squealed as a small resurgence of silver minnows flashed through the clearer run beside the willow roots, quick as coins in sunshine and real enough for everyone to see.
A resurgence is a renewed increase or revival after decline. So those minnows mean the river is answering our care in little living sparks.
By the fourth evening, the sharp fear around the council ring had begun to abate, not because the work was finished, but because the valley had learned how to pair hope with records.
Abate means become less intense or widespread, like fear, wind, or trouble easing step by step instead of vanishing all at once.
So we keep counting, keep calibrating, and keep reading the trajectory honestly, because patient measurement protects the river from careless triumph.
The river still needed guardians, but now Willowmere could hear the difference between panic and pattern, and that wiser listening became part of the recovery too. On Thursday, July 23, 2026, the restored Willowmere Bend glittered under bright ribbons and painted pebbles as the council opened a cheerful river day for every family that had helped the water return.
If we keep these markers, these fair turns, and this story, does that become Willowmere's legacy for the next dry season too?
A legacy is something valuable handed forward from one generation or season to the next, such as a lesson, a custom, or a cared-for place.
Juniper then lifted a cedar board above the stepping stones and revealed the valley's new covenant in coral letters beside blue Q marks and a tiny painted kingfisher seal.
A covenant is a serious shared agreement built on promises and duties, stronger than a casual promise because everyone enters it together.
Moss nodded at the orchard families and said the goal was not to perpetuate panic, secret storage, or tired suspicion, but to perpetuate the bright habits that had repaired the river.
Perpetuate means cause something to continue or last, whether it is a good practice we protect or a bad habit we refuse to keep alive.
Iona smiled at the children lining smooth amber stones and said a sagacious valley learns before the next shortage arrives instead of waiting to be frightened into wisdom again.
Sagacious means deeply wise and full of sound judgment. Right, like noticing the lesson before the trouble has to shout.
Exactly, sagacious choices look ahead kindly and clearly rather than chasing comfort for one more careless hour.
Juniper praised Suri's astute reading of the river marks, Moss's canny watering schedule, and Brindle's shrewd repair plan that protected the marsh, fields, and bridge at once.
Astute means quick to notice what matters and sharp in practical understanding, especially when the clues are easy to miss.
Canny means careful, sensible, and cleverly alert about how to use limited resources without wasting them.
Shrewd means smart in a realistic, practical way, the kind of judgment that sees how one small fix can protect 5 larger problems from growing.
Moss then pointed to an old empty bucket painted on the cedar board and warned that hidden extra fills would bring inequity back to the bend, even if the river looked bright for a while.
Inequity means unfairness in how burdens or benefits are shared, and a thirsty valley feels every unfair bucket almost immediately.
Tavi swooped over Sunstone Bridge and declared that if families started guarding turns like trophies again, rivalry would return faster than drought ever needed to.
Rivalry is bitter competition between sides who begin caring more about beating each other than solving the real problem together.
Iona rested one long silver wing on the covenant board, and said the valley must never let rivalry harden into schism, where neighbors stop trusting one another enough to share a river at all.
Schism means a deep split into opposing groups, the kind of division that can crack a community long after the original shortage is gone.
Then our covenant protects the river and our legacy both, because sagacious, astute, canny, and shrewd neighbors share early sow inequity, rivalry, and schism, never get the chance to grow.
The council cheered, the restored current flashed around the pale stones, and Willowmere's brightest victory was not merely more water, but the wise promise to keep abundance from becoming another future argument.